You believe that defending yourself when you're wronged is a sign of strength. You think that explaining your side, correcting the record, or firing back at an accusation proves that you won't be pushed around. That belief is not just wrong, it is the leash they have been using to pull you, and you have been grabbing it with both hands every single time. Every time you have reacted, you have already lost. Not because your reaction was wrong, not because your argument was weak, because the moment you reacted with anger, with defense, with the urgent need to explain yourself, you handed the other person the only thing they actually came for, your response. Think about the last time someone accused you of something you did not do, or pushed you in a way that was designed to get a rise, or said something in a group setting that was aimed specifically at finding the edge of your patience. You felt it. The heat in your chest, the voice that rose slightly, the explanation that came out faster than you intended. You responded, you defended, you explained, and the moment you did, something shifted in the room, not in your favor. Here is what was actually happening beneath that interaction. The accusation, the provocation, the public test. None of them were about the stated content. They were intelligence operations. The person running them was not trying to win an argument. They were trying to locate the specific pressure points that make you move, and your response was the answer to every question they were asking. You did not lose the argument. You completed their research. This is called reactive exposure, the automatic process by which a person's emotional response to a social trigger reveals the precise coordinates of their psychological vulnerability. They press, you react. The reaction tells them everything: where you are weak, what you protect, how much force it takes to destabilize you. You handed them a map to your interior and signed it with your own name. Niccolo Machiavelli documented this mechanism from inside the most politically lethal rooms in human history, the councils of Florence, where a single visible reaction could end a career, a freedom, or a life. He was not theorizing from a comfortable distance. He was watching men destroy themselves in real time by responding to provocations that were engineered specifically to extract that response. He wrote it down with the precision of a man who understood that his own survival depended on never becoming the subject of his own research. He wrote, "The first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him." He meant that the man who cannot control his response to pressure will always be surrounded by people who know exactly how to use that response against him. 7 laws. Each one names a specific situation where your reaction, your explanation, or your response has been costing you power you did not know you were spending. 7 situations you have been in recently. 7 moments where silence would have won what words surrendered. The man who walks out of this video still reacting is the man who stays mappable. The man who stays has just become significantly harder to find. You have been fighting the wrong war your entire life. Not because you lacked strategy, not because you were outmatched, because you were playing a game that only exists when you agree to show up for it. Every argument you entered, every accusation you defended, every provocation you answered, you were not participating in a conflict. You were providing a service. You were supplying the one thing the other person needed to maintain power over you, your response. The man who does not respond cannot be defeated, not because he is stronger, because there is nothing to defeat. You cannot win a fight against someone who refuses to be in it. There is a social mechanic that has been operating on you since the first time someone figured out that you could be moved. It is called reaction harvesting. The deliberate deployment of accusations, provocations, and social pressure, specifically to extract an emotional response that the harvester then uses as intelligence, as proof, or as leverage. They are not trying to win the argument, they are trying to confirm that the argument works on you. Every time you reacted, you confirmed it. Every time you explained, you validated their authority to require an explanation. Every time you defended, you accepted their frame before you opened your mouth. The first law is the one that has cost you the most, and it is the one you have violated the most recently. Before any law is named, understand the infrastructure beneath all 7. Every social environment you inhabit operates as an intelligence network. Everyone in that network, consciously or not, is continuously collecting data about the people around them, not maliciously in most cases. Structurally, the hierarchy of any social environment rewards the person with the most accurate model of the other players, and the fastest way to build an accurate model of another person is to watch how they respond under pressure. Your reaction is not a response, it is a data transmission. When you react with anger, you have transmitted your pressure point. When you defend with urgency, you have transmitted what you are afraid of losing. When you explain without being asked, you have transmitted that their opinion of you matters enough to alter your behavior. When you respond to a provocation with visible emotion, you have transmitted the exact calibration data the other party needed to determine how much force it takes to move you. The first law is not the most dramatic. It is the most immediately costly because it is the mistake you are most likely making right now, possibly today. Law 1. Never defend yourself against an accusation. When you have been wrongly accused, the instinct is universal and immediate. Produce the evidence, correct the record, explain the context. The instinct feels like justice. It is not. It is the most reliable mechanism by which an accusation converts into a confirmed reality. Here is what actually happens in the moment you begin your defense. Before the first word of your explanation leaves your mouth, the observer, whether that is your accuser or the room watching the exchange, has already made a primary assessment. The assessment is not about the content of your defense. It is about the fact that you are defending, and the specific piece of information that fact communicates is, this accusation matters to you enough to alter your behavior. The guilty over-explain. This is not a moral judgment. It is a documented psychological pattern. The person with something to hide produces more words, more evidence, more context, because the stakes of being disbelieved are high. The person with nothing to hide produces less, because the truth does not require management. When you defend with urgency, the observer cannot distinguish between your urgency and guilt. Both produce the same behavior, and in the absence of a way to separate them, they default to the assumption that explains the urgency. The accusation must have been worth defending against. Think about the last time you explained yourself to someone who had already decided what they believed. The explanation, the context, the clarification that arrived in slightly too many words. You watched their expression. The explanation did not change their mind. It confirmed the frame they had already built, because the act of explaining accepted that their judgment of you was something that required a response. This is called presumption reinforcement, the psychological process by which a defensive response to a judgment amplifies the observer's confidence in that judgment, rather than diminishing it. You did not clear the accusation, you funded it. Machiavelli watched this mechanism operate at lethal stakes in the courts of Florence. The man who rushed to explain his loyalty when questioned communicated, by the act of rushing, that he understood there was something to question. The man who received the same question with stillness communicated that the question was not worth the energy of defense. Machiavelli wrote, "Everyone sees what you appear to be, but few touch what you really are." He meant that your visible response is the only thing the room operates on, and the most powerful visible response to an accusation is the specific stillness of a man who does not recognize the accusation as something that requires his participation. The correction is precise. When accused of anything, by anyone whose authority over you is not absolute, you receive the accusation without response. You do not deny, you do not confirm, you do not provide context. You look at the person who made the accusation, and you allow the silence to communicate what they were hoping your words would confirm or deny. The silence gives them nothing to work with. The silence is not admission. It is the refusal to step onto a battlefield they designed specifically to extract a reaction from you. The man who never defends himself forces his accusers to do something they are not prepared for. Hold their accusation in the open air, unsupported by your reaction, until it either proves itself or collapses under its own weight. Most accusations collapse. They were never designed to survive silence. They were designed to survive your response. That was the most common mistake. The one you make without knowing it is a mistake at all. What comes next is more dangerous, because it is disguised as honesty. Law 2, explanation is submission in disguise. Every explanation you give to someone who did not ask for it is a social contract you are signing without reading the terms. The terms are, by explaining, you accept that this person has the authority to require an accounting of your decisions from you. You accept that your choices exist in a category that requires justification. You accept that their understanding of your reasoning is a prerequisite for the legitimacy of your action. You accept all of this, and you accept it before the first word of your explanation is delivered. In the single act of choosing to explain, you made a decision, you set a boundary, you chose a direction, and then because someone expressed confusion or disapproval, or simply looked at you in a way that communicated they did not understand, you began explaining. You told them the reasoning. You walked them through the logic. You ensured they understood why you did what you did. You did not owe them that. They did not earn it. But you gave it, because the specific discomfort of being misunderstood felt more urgent than the cost of the disclosure. The cost of the disclosure is this. You have communicated that your decisions require external validation to feel complete. You have established that their approval is a variable you track. You have demonstrated that the discomfort of their disapproval is sufficient to change your behavior, because explaining is a behavioral change. You altered what you were doing, which was moving forward, and redirected that energy toward managing their perception of your movement. Explaining yourself to someone who has no authority over you is like submitting your work to a committee that was not assigned to review it. The committee now believes they were assigned to review it, because you submitted. The dark mechanic operating beneath this pattern is what can be called voluntary jurisdiction, the process by which a person expands the range of people who have legitimate authority over their decisions by offering unsolicited explanations to those people. Every time you explain a decision to someone who did not request an explanation, you are extending jurisdiction to them. Over time, the people in your life who have received enough of your explanations begin to experience your decisions as things that belong in their jurisdiction, things they are entitled to understand, approve, or question. You did not give them that entitlement directly. You installed it through a series of explanations they did not ask for and you did not need to give. The correction is a single behavioral discipline. State your position once, one sentence, then stop talking. The silence that follows is not confusion, it is not coldness. It is the specific communication of a man who has said what needed to be said and does not experience the other person's need for more as a requirement to produce more. If they need more, they can ask, and if they ask, you can decide based on who is asking and what authority they hold over you, whether the question has earned an answer. The powerful man explains himself to his doctor, his lawyer, his closest confidants. Everyone else receives his decisions as facts, not as proposals awaiting approval. Think about the last time someone tried to get a reaction out of you, a comment in a group setting, a subtle challenge in a meeting, a message designed to destabilize. You responded, you had to silence, felt like losing. But every time you responded, you were handing them something they needed, and you did not have to give. Law 3. Never reveal your intentions before execution. The person who knows your plan before it is complete does not need to attack you directly. They simply need to position themselves between you and your destination, and the specific information about where your destination is came from you. Every timeline you disclosed, every plan you shared before it was protected by results. Every ambition you described to someone who smiled while filing the information for later use. You treated transparency as loyalty. You treated disclosure as closeness. You handed people the map to a fortress you had not finished building. In 2017, a documented case in a major technology company's internal communications, later disclosed in a legal proceeding, showed a systematic pattern of how proposed projects were killed, not through direct rejection, but through what the investigators called pre-execution neutralization. The pattern was consistent. An employee would share their project concept with a colleague before formal submission. The colleague, recognizing the competitive threat, would begin a quiet campaign to position the concept as impractical, the employee as unreliable, or the timing as wrong, months before the project reached the formal review process. By the time the project was submitted, the environment had been prepared to receive it as already evaluated and found wanting. The project did not fail in the review, it failed in the conversations that happened between the disclosure and the submission. The employee gave the weapon to the person who used it, voluntarily, in a conversation that felt like collaboration. Your intentions are the only asset you possess that is completely protected until you choose to expose it. The moment you disclose an intention, it stops being protected. It becomes available to be undercut, redirected, stolen, or simply waited out by someone who knows that if they let your timeline expire, the result you were pursuing disappears with it. Machiavelli's law here is absolute. Announce results, not intentions. Let the finished work speak. The completed promotion, the published work, the executed decision, these can be engaged with as realities. The plan that is disclosed before it is complete can be engaged with as a possibility that might not happen, and people will help ensure it does not happen if it threatens their position. The correction requires the specific discipline of separating your internal processing from your external disclosure. You think freely, you plan completely, you discuss with no one whose interests could conflict with your success, and you announce the result on the day it cannot be taken back. There is a version of power that operates entirely without audience, without performance, without the need for the room to witness it. The next law is where that version of power lives. Law 4. Ignoring someone removes the fuel. Their power runs on. Every social aggressor, every person who diminishes, provokes, disrespects or manipulates requires one resource to sustain their behavior. Not your submission, not your anger, your attention. Attention is the oxygen that every form of social aggression needs to survive. Positive attention feeds it. Negative attention feeds it. Defensive attention feeds it. Angry attention is the richest source of all because it confirms that the aggressor has found the precise frequency that makes you respond, and they will return to that frequency every time they need the fuel. Ignoring, genuine ignoring, not performed indifference, not the loud silence of someone who wants to be noticed. Ignoring removes the oxygen entirely. The aggressor presses. Nothing happens. They press harder. Nothing. The loop that was designed to run, press, react, confirm, escalate, cannot complete. The circuit has no current because you removed the source. The specific psychological consequence for the aggressor is disorienting in a way that no counterattack produces. A counterattack confirms their model of the interaction. They expected resistance and found it, which validates the approach and tells them which direction to push next. Ignoring does not confirm the model. It produces something that social aggressors are genuinely unprepared for, the experience of exerting force against something that does not push back, does not give way, and does not acknowledge that the force was applied. The man who is genuinely ignored, not theatrically, genuinely, does not know what to do next. The entire social architecture he has built around the expectation of a reaction has collapsed. He cannot escalate toward a reaction that is not coming. He cannot claim victory over a person who is not engaging. He cannot build a narrative around someone who has declined to participate in the story he is trying to construct. You have been taught that ignoring is passive, that it communicates weakness, that it hands the other person a victory by default. This is precisely what the people who need your reactions want you to believe, because the moment you believe it, you respond, and the response is the only thing that gives them power over you. The victory they claim from your silence is a performance with no audience. The victory they extract from your reaction is real. Now turn the lens inward, because the next law is not about what they do to you. It is about what you have been doing to yourself, and handing them to use. Law 5. Never show that you care about their opinion. The need for approval is not a personality trait. It is a handle. The specific mechanics of this, every time you visibly adjust your behavior, your expression, or your position in response to someone's approval or disapproval of you, you demonstrate that the handle is attached and functional. You are not demonstrating sensitivity or social awareness. You are demonstrating that the mechanism works, and the people who now know the mechanism works will return to it every time they need to move you. Flattery works on the man who needs to be flattered. It moves him toward the person flattering him, which means that person now has directional control over his behavior. The specific mechanism is elegant in its simplicity. Compliment the man in the direction you want him to move. If he responds to the compliment by moving, you now know exactly how to steer him. Shame works on the man who is afraid of being shamed. It moves him away from the behavior the shaming person wants to eliminate. If he responds to the shame by changing his behavior, you now know the precise mechanism for controlling his actions. Make him feel seen in his worst light, and he will correct in whatever direction removes the discomfort. Both flattery and shame require the same thing to work, that the target visibly cares about the opinion of the person deploying them. The man who does not visibly care is not flattered. He is simply complimented, and he receives the compliment with the same neutrality he receives weather reports. The man who does not visibly care is not shamed. He is simply criticized, and he considers the criticism with the same detachment he applies to any input that may or may not be relevant to his direction. Think about the specific person in your life who has been most effective at moving your behavior, either toward something they wanted or away from something they did not want. Now think about what mechanism they used. In almost every case, it was either approval, the warmth that arrived when you did what they wanted, or disapproval, the withdrawal, the criticism, the disappointment that arrived when you did not. Your responsiveness to both signals is what gave them the mechanism. Schopenhauer, the philosopher who spent his career dissecting the specific ways in which the need for external validation destroys the exceptional individual, wrote that most men are so dependent on the opinions of others that they are not living their own lives at all. They are living the life that others' opinions of them make possible. He described it as wearing a mask that eventually fuses to the face until the performance of caring what others think becomes indistinguishable from actually caring. What you are about to learn is the law most people never understand until they have already paid the highest possible price for not knowing it. Law 6. Non-reaction is the only response that cannot be used against you. Every word you say can be taken out of context. Every explanation can be reframed as an excuse. Every defense can be used as evidence of what you were defending against. Every expression of anger can be used to characterize your temperament. Every visible emotion can be deployed as proof of instability, weakness, or guilt, depending on what framing serves the person holding the record of your reaction. Nothing you produce in response to pressure is safe from being weaponized. This is not a hypothetical. This is the documented operational strategy of every sophisticated social operator, from political adversaries to legal opponents to personal enemies to the colleague who has been building a case against you in your manager's mind. The strategy does not require fabrication. It only requires collection, gathering your reactions, your expressions, your defenses, and your explanations, and then deploying them in the context that serves the operator's purpose. Your response was not designed for the context in which it will eventually be presented. You produced it under specific emotional conditions, in a specific moment, with specific context that will not travel with it when it is repurposed. What arrives at its destination is the reaction, stripped of context, carrying only the weight of the emotion that produced it. Silence produces nothing that can be collected, nothing given, nothing taken, nothing extracted, nothing weaponized. The man who produces no reactions gives the collector nothing to work with. The man who never explains gives the reframer no explanation to distort. The man who never responds to provocation gives the characterizer no behavior to characterize. Non-reaction is not passive. It is the most active form of information security available to you. You are not failing to respond. You are choosing to deny access to the raw material from which attacks are built. The silence is operational. It is the specific, deliberate decision to refuse the transaction that the other party is trying to execute. The correction here is internal before it is behavioral. You must change what you understand silence to mean. Silence in response to an attack is not an absence, it is a presence. The presence of a man who has assessed the attack and determined that it does not merit the resource of a response. The person on the receiving end of that silence understands exactly what it communicates. They expected a reaction and received instead the specific communication of someone who found the attack insufficient to respond to. That communication is more devastating to the attacker than any counter-argument you could have produced. You cannot control what people say about your words. You can control how many words you give them to work with. The final law is not a strategy. It is the condition that makes every previous law possible, and the specific state that every law you have learned today is building toward. Law 7. The man others cannot read, cannot be beaten. B cannot be beaten. Every social strategy that has ever been used against you required one prerequisite, knowing where you would go. The manipulation that worked required knowing you would respond to the specific emotional lever pulled. The provocation that landed required knowing the specific pressure point that would produce a visible reaction. The accusation that destabilized you required knowing the specific fear of being misunderstood, of being seen as guilty, of losing the approval of the room that would make you react. All of it required a map. And the map was built from your reactions, accumulated across dozens of interactions, refined through observation, confirmed through the specific intelligence data your responses produced every time someone pressed you and watched what happened. The unreadable man has no map, not because he has hidden himself behind a performance of impassivity, because he has genuinely ceased to produce the data from which maps are built. He does not react, he does not explain, he does not defend. He does not show that he cares about opinions that have no authority over him. He does not reveal his intentions before they are complete. He gives nothing to work with, and the people around him, after enough failed attempts to locate his pressure points, stop trying. They stop trying, not because they have become more respectful, because they have run the calculation and determined that the cost of attempting to move him exceeds any potential benefit. The cost is the specific disorientation of exerting social force against someone who does not respond to it, which is its own kind of exhausting. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor who governed the most powerful empire in the ancient world while managing simultaneous military campaigns, political conspiracies, and family betrayals, wrote a private journal he never intended to publish. In it, he returned repeatedly to one principle: the power of the man who cannot be moved by external force is not in his ability to resist. It is in his understanding that the external force requires his reaction to have any effect at all. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." He meant precisely this. The event has no power over you until you react to it. The reaction is the power transfer. The man who does not react has not lost anything because nothing was transferred. Non-reaction is not the removal of power from the interaction. It is the retention of power that would otherwise be transferred the moment you respond. Look at all 7 together. Never defend yourself against an accusation. Explanation is submission in disguise. Never reveal your intentions before execution. Ignoring someone removes the fuel their power runs on. Never show that you care about their opinion. Non-reaction is the only response that cannot be used against you. The man others cannot read, cannot be beaten. 7 laws. 1 architecture. The architecture of a man whose interior belongs entirely to him. What Machiavelli understood, and what the courts of Florence proved at lethal stakes, is that the most durable form of power is not power that is displayed, it is power that cannot be accessed. The man who cannot be read, cannot be moved, cannot be baited into surrendering the data his opponents need. That man does not need to assert his power. His environment adjusts to it automatically because there is no other option. If this video named something you have been living through, like it. 1 sentence. Subscribe if this precision is what you need consistently. Tomorrow you will be in a situation that calls for a reaction, a provocation, an accusation, an explanation that someone is waiting for. You now know what that situation actually is. The question is whether you will walk into it the same way you walked into everyone before it, or whether you will walk into it as the man who understands that his silence is the most precise weapon in the room. The choice happens before you open your mouth. Make it before they give you the chance to forget.